All right, so New Kingdom. The rise of the New Kingdom happens after the fall of the Middle Kingdom. What happened? The Middle Kingdom had some crop failures, it had civil unrest, and it had foreign invasion from the ancient Near East. So coming across the Arabian Peninsula and down through the Sinai Peninsula or Strait, we had invasions from Assyrians. I know. It's a blending of worlds. See? Here in this timeline, do you see it? So the fall of the Middle Kingdom happens with the invasion from the north of the Assyrians. And then it's a little short-lived time of chaos and collapse. And then the New Kingdom happens, in which they will kick out the Assyrians and establish what historians refer to as the New Kingdom. And the New Kingdom gets all the attention because this is when Egypt was at its biggest expanse, and it was its baddest, most powerful. It was faster than before. It was stronger than before. It was richer than before. And so it gets a lot of attention in terms of scholarship for historians, archaeologists, and art historians. The capital of the empire was originally, where is it? Let me move over here. The original capital of the empire had always been Memphis. Memphis, Tennessee? No. Memphis, Tennessee is named after Memphis, ancient Egypt. Why? Well, because with the expanse of the United States of America across the Mississippi River, they identified the Mississippi as the American version of the Nile. I know. So Memphis, Tennessee is named after Memphis, Egypt, to parallel the Mississippi and the Nile and the greatness of the ancient Egyptians with the greatness of the United States of America. Crazy, right? So Memphis had always been the original capital of the empire in the Old Kingdom and the New Kingdom. And then it was moved down to Thebes. Why? Because it was in Thebes, or near Thebes, that there was a great temple to one of the primary gods of the Egyptian mythology. I know I haven't gotten into all of the gods and goddesses of ancient Egypt, but I told you in the first week, we cannot get into the minutia, and we just have to hit these highlights. So I'm introducing gods and goddesses as they relate to artworks. If you want to know more about the ancient Egyptian gods and goddesses, email me, Google search it. But I will just tell you that at this time in the New Kingdom, we see the rising popularity of one specific god. His name is Amun-Re. He's a sun god, and he embodies two previous sun gods, Amun and Re. He's like a hybrid, and he's more powerful even. There are many gods that occupy different natural elements. There are many sun gods. There are many water gods. There are many gods because, well, the sun and other natural elements have different behaviors, right? There's the sun that brings light. There's the sun that brings heat. There's the sun that dries things out and kills things. So there are many sun gods. Amun and Re were two versions that came together in the New Kingdom to be celebrated as one god. Amun and Re became Amun-Re. Does that make sense? And at this time in the New Kingdom, Amun-Re has got a major temple complex building near Thebes. To politically align themselves with this very popular god, the Egyptian pharaoh will move the capital from Memphis down to Thebes. It also seems to make sense logistically because it's halfway between the upper and the lower Egypt. And so it seems to be more centrally located for government control. Does that make sense? Let's move forward. I mention all of this because the power dynamics of the pharaohs The power dynamics of the pharaohs really take precedence in the history or the historical discussion of the New Kingdom. And it's also during the New Kingdom that we have a lot of our major players that you're probably aware of, like King Tut. He's in this one. I roll my eyes, but I'll tell you why I roll my eyes. Okay, so let's go hang out with one of these rulers. Yeah? Here we go. King Hatshepsut. Here's a statue of King Hatshepsut. King Hatshepsut has a very feminine face and breasts. Why? Because this king is a female monarch. What? Now, if you know about Hatshepsut, you're like, I totally know about this. But if you don't, this is going to be your first introduction to this awesome person who, until recently, was completely erased from discussion in the past, in the ancient world, and in recent scholarship. Until the last maybe 50 years, 30 years, 30 years. Okay, well, who is this? This is King Hatshepsut, who is a woman. Shouldn't we call her Queen Hatshepsut? Well, she is the first great female monarch whose name has ever been recorded in history. We are not saying that women were not ruling as sole leaders of Egypt, but she is the first that we have evidence of. She ruled for 20 years. How did this come about? Well, she was a queen. Oh, here, she was a queen, and she was married to a king. It doesn't matter who he was, whatever. He died, and his son from a minor wife was to be in charge, but he was too young. So, in place, while he was growing up, she became regent. She became the protector of the future king, and she became the regent. However, she said, you know what? That kid, he's a total jerk. And he was. And she said, I'm going to just stay leader. I know that he's of age now, but I'm not going to step down. So, instead of regent, she stepped in as king. Part of her imperial plan as king was to maintain the power of the new kingdom without expanding. So she halted imperial expansion, and she wanted to reinforce the infrastructure of Egypt. I know, if this is all sounding like too much like a poli-sci class, I told you, I warned you, the new kingdom is all about the politics of the leaders. Let me rephrase this. King Hatshepsut, here she is, she said, I know we've expanded our borders and it's brought in a lot of wealth, and with that, a lot of trade and also slaves, because conquered people become slaves of Egypt. But she says, I think we've done enough of that for now. Let's stop war. War is expensive. Instead, let's maintain these borders and work on correcting and strengthening our empire. Sounds great, right? What a wonderful idea. Is this, for lack of another word I can't think of, I'm going to say a word that's not academic, this pissed off the nobles. The nobility and the government, or the governmental officials, they hated this new policy. Why? Because they reaped all the benefits of the imperial expansion. And so when she said, no, let's maintain, let's fix all of your corruption, they were against her. So she started building enemies. Another thing she did was she moved the capital back to the old capital of Memphis. She wanted to reclaim the glory of the old kingdom and the new kingdom. This pissed off the nobility and the priests, specifically the priests of that big up-and-coming powerful Amun-Re. This was a popular god, their popular priest, and now you're going to move the capital away from their center? So she was making enemies while she was trying to maintain and strengthen and foster the civic structure of Egypt. Woo, Hatshepsut. The imagery I'm showing you here are all preserved pieces of her in her king's regalia. So we saw her wearing the names of the ancient Egyptian kings. She sits like an Egyptian king, like Khafre or Menkaure, right? Here she sits as a sphinx, right? A lion, just like Khafre. She has a ceremonial beard. She has her mane. All of these artifacts are coming from her burial site. Her burial site is in Deir el-Bahri, Deir el-Bahri. It's just above Thebes and just across from Karnak. So Thebes was the original, or the new capital. She took the capital back up to Memphis, but her temple is here in Deir el-Bahri, which again is a modern Arabic word, not the Egyptian word for this site. Here we are looking at her mortuary temple. It is a rock-cut tomb. There's the rock of the canyon. It is extremely elaborate, unlike what we looked at before. But what we see is these tiered platforms with these ramps. And these architectural structures were typical of royal rock-cut tombs. Here's another view of it. They're much more elaborate, right? What we're missing here is everything else. Originally, these ramps would have connected to gardens, and the statuary that we were looking at, those sphinx, they would have lined the sides of these causeways. What we see here is a reconstruction of the garden avenue with those sphinx that would walk up to the first ramp, and then after that first ramp, you would have access to her royal chapel. And then if you were to continue up into, the temple to Hathor, or chapel to Hathor, Hathor being the mother goddess. And then up this ramp here, her body would be placed inside behind her temple to her. Now, again, you might be thinking, why do they get temples? Well, because they're seen as gods here on earth. So just like how Hathor would have a temple, Amun-Re would have a temple, the pharaohs would also have temples. So this is the temple in front of her burial spot. Here in this map, this line here is the canyon rock face, and we're seeing those ramps leading up. This double line here is what is behind the rock face. Does that make sense? So we're seeing the canyon wall and the rocks leading up to, or the structures leading up to it. And then her body would have been placed within this area here. It's right next to another royal temple and another royal temple and another royal temple, because they're all placed one right after the other. There were over 200 statues of Hatshepsut that were placed at her mortuary temple. The uppermost level featured this figure here. This is her dressed as a king. She has the names, she has the ceremonial beard, and then she's holding in her hands these granite orbs. These granite orbs which would have symbolized earth and heaven. Here she is as a sphinx as well. Sadly, She made a lot of enemies. And so when she died, and her stepson, his name was Thutmose III, when she died, her stepson ordered for the removal of her. The physical chiseling of her name and her image from all construction, all walls decorating, any kind of monument or decorative wall that she had built, any government buildings that she had her names on, all of that was literally chiseled out. Her mortuary temple was looted and then used for Thutmose's burial. So all of her statuary was smashed and dumped and has only been recently reassembled. So literally her name was erased from history, and we didn't even know about her until very recent scholarship.